And as I sit here, writing this, I can hear the whispering starting again, soft and menacing, a reminder that some ghosts refuse to be left behind. I had never believed in ghosts, not really, anyway. Sure, the thought of them had always made the hair on my arms stand on end late at night, but it was always just a fleeting fear, the kind that was easy to laugh off in the light of day. That was until I moved into the old Henderson house on the outskirts of Cold Spring Harbor. It was a sprawling, decrepit mansion that had been left vacant for years. The price was a steal, and as a newly minted freelance writer looking for a quiet place to work on my first novel, it seemed ideal. The locals had tried to warn me about the house's history, muttering about strange disappearances and unexplained phenomena, but I had shrugged it off as small-town superstition. The first few weeks were uneventful, peaceful even. I spent my days writing and exploring the dusty, sunlit corridors of the mansion. It was during one of these explorations that I stumbled upon a small, hidden room beneath the staircase. It was empty, save for a dusty, antique mirror hanging on the wall. The glass was so speckled and tarnished that my reflection looked distorted, broken up into wavering shards of light. Something about it made my stomach churn, but I chalked it up to the eerie quiet of the house. One night, as I lay in bed, the silence was shattered by the sudden sound of footsteps creaking above my head. I told myself it was just the house settling, but the footsteps grew louder, more deliberate. Frozen in fear, I listened as they seemed to move across the ceiling, down the wall, and stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. Then, as suddenly as they had started, the footsteps ceased. The next morning, I found my kitchen in disarray. Chairs were overturned, and the contents of my cupboards were strewn across the floor. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That a ghost was haunting the Henderson house? I cleaned up the mess, my hands shaking, and tried to convince myself that I had forgotten to secure a window, that a strong wind had done the damage. As days turned into weeks, the disturbances grew more frequent and more terrifying. I began to hear whispers, soft and sibilant, slipping through the cracks in the walls. They called my name, stretching it out into a long, sinister hiss. Objects began to move on their own, propelled by unseen forces. I found my typewriter in the bathroom one morning, dripping wet, as though it had been submerged in the bathtub. One evening, while working in my study, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest, to see the room empty. But the temperature had dropped so sharply that I could see my breath fogging in the air. Then, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam trembling as I turned it on. That's when I saw it, in the mirror across the room, a pale, spectral figure, its eyes hollow and dark, staring back at me. I screamed, stumbling backward, the flashlight slipping from my fingers and shattering on the floor. The room was plunged back into darkness, and I heard the soft, whispering voices converging on me, calling my name over and over again. "Leave," they hissed, "leave or stay forever." Panic seized me, and I ran, bolting from the room and down the hallway. The air was thick with cold, and the darkness seemed to press in on me from all sides. I made it to the front door, throwing it open and escaping into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached the center of town, gasping for breath under the safety of a street lamp. The next day, I returned to the house with a local priest, but the disturbances only worsened after his visit. The apparitions grew bolder, appearing not just in mirrors, but in the very corners of my rooms, watching, always watching. The whispers turned into screams, and the cold became a constant, unyielding presence. I knew I couldn't stay, but I was also too terrified to leave, afraid of what might follow me. The story of the Henderson house, my story, isn't over. It's waiting, biding its time, until I decide to either face what lurks in the shadows or run from it forever. And as I sit here, writing this, I can hear the whispering starting again, soft and menacing, a reminder that some ghosts refuse to be left behind. As the days turned into nights, my sanity began to fray at the edges. The shadows in the Henderson house seemed to thicken, pulsing with a life of their own. The whispering voices became a constant cacophony in my ears, sometimes so loud that I couldn't hear my own thoughts. I began to avoid mirrors, for every time I accidentally caught my reflection, I saw them, those hollow-eyed specters, hovering just over my shoulder. One particularly grim night, the storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. Thunder rumbled like the growling of some massive beast, and lightning illuminated the house in sporadic flashes of terror. It was during one such burst of light that I saw it clearly for the first time, the apparition. It stood at the foot of the grand staircase, a figure so ghastly, so drenched in darkness, that my heart seemed to stop. Its eyes were like black holes, pulling at the very light around it, its mouth an endless void of despair. It raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and pointed at me with a finger that seemed made of shadows. "Your soul," it whispered, a voice like the wind passing through the desolate, empty halls, "is mine." I backed away, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the creature, each moment feeling like an eternity. Just as I thought it would advance, a loud crash echoed through the house, and the lights flickered violently. In the chaos, the figure vanished, but the sense of dread lingered, heavier than before. In the following days, the manifestations grew more physical, more violent. Books would fly off shelves, shattering against the wall with force enough to leave marks. The sound of chains dragging across the floorboards became a nightly event, and the stench of decay permeated the house, a constant reminder of the presence that had claimed the space as its own. One evening, I tried to communicate with the spirits, my voice barely a whisper amid the howling wind outside. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling. The answer came not in words, but in a vision that materialized in the air before me. I saw the house as it had been decades ago, a place of opulence and laughter, but underneath that facade, there was darkness, rituals of a most macabre nature, where shadows were summoned and souls were bargained with. The vision shifted, and I saw a room hidden beneath the floorboards of the basement, a room that was not in the blueprints. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, I pried open the trapdoor that led to this hidden place. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mold. As I descended the creaking steps, the temperature dropped and my flashlight flickered. At the bottom, I found a circle of stones and dried bloodstains, remnants of the rituals I had seen in my vision. Suddenly, the air shifted, growing colder, and I felt a hand grip my shoulder. I spun around, flashlight swinging wildly, but there was nothing there, just the oppressive darkness and the echoes of my own rapid breathing. The grip tightened, invisible yet palpable, and I heard the voice again, whispering right into my ear, "Do not disturb what lies dormant." I ran upstairs, the sounds of my pursuer's footsteps echoing behind me. I slammed the trapdoor shut and shoved a cabinet over it, my heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic drum. But even as I barricaded myself in my room, the sense of being watched never left. Shadows danced along the walls, taunting me, and the whispers turned into mocking laughter. Sleep became an elusive specter, just out of reach. Now, I write this, knowing that my time here may be drawing to a close, not by my own choosing, but by the will of something far darker than I had ever imagined residing within these walls. The Henderson house is alive, not with ghosts, but with something older, something that has waited patiently for someone like me to unlock the horrors hidden within its heart. And as I lay down each night, listening to the house groan and whisper, I know that this story is not mine alone to tell. It is a story that continues to unfold with each passing night, each shadow that moves just out of the corner of my eye, each whisper that finds its way to my ears. This is not the end, but a doorway to a nightmare that stretches far beyond the confines of these haunted walls. As the nights drew on, my entrapment within the Henderson house became not just a physical confinement, but a mental one as well. The specters that haunted the halls grew not only in number, but in malevolence. Each apparition seemed more terrifying than the last, and the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred until I could no longer trust my senses. I decided to delve deeper into the house's dark history in a desperate attempt to understand what I was up against. Dusty tomes and old newspaper clippings hinted at a curse, one that stemmed from a betrayal so bitter it had soaked into the very bones of the building. Each scrap of paper, each whispered lore, led me to the same grim conclusion: the house demanded a reckoning. One stormy evening, as the wind howled like the cries of the damned, I found an old diary hidden beneath the floorboards of what I had come to call the Whispering Room. The handwriting was a scrawl, desperate and hurried. It belonged to Eleanor Henderson, the original mistress of the house, who had vanished without a trace in 1891. Her words were a window into the madness that had consumed her. "They are not at rest," she wrote, "bound by chains heavier than iron. I hear them at night, their cries pitiful and full of sorrow. They seek what I cannot give. I fear I may have unleashed something horrible, something that cannot be contained. May God have mercy on my soul." That night, as I read, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick, suffocating, and I felt eyes upon me, watching, waiting. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room, its form vague and undulating. "You know our pain," it hissed, its voice a mix of grief and anger. "You know our chains." I stood, my body trembling. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Freedom," the shadow replied, its form becoming more defined, a man, or the semblance of one, his features twisted in agony. "Release us." "And if I do, will you leave me in peace?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The figure laughed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. "Peace is not ours to give," it said. The next day, I scoured the house for any sign of what might release these tortured souls. In the basement, behind a false wall, I found a collection of artifacts, old, rusted shackles, chains, and trinkets that hummed with a strange energy. They were relics of the house's dark past, symbols of the bondage that had trapped so many. As I gathered each item, the air grew colder and the whispers louder. They swirled around me, frenzied, desperate. I took everything to the heart of the house, the main hall, where I had first seen the apparition. There, I arranged them in a circle and set them alight. The fire burned unnaturally, green and blue flames licking the air, consuming the relics of past horrors. The house shook, a tremor that felt like it would tear the very foundation apart. Screams echoed through the halls, not just of terror, but of relief. When the fire died down, the house fell silent. For the first time since I had moved in, the oppressive weight of despair lifted slightly. But I knew it was not over. This had been but a reprieve. That night, as I lay in bed, the air once again grew cold. A new figure appeared at the foot of my bed. It was Eleanor Henderson, her expression somber. "You have begun to right the wrongs," she said, her voice echoing like a bell. "But there is more to be done." "What more can I do?" I asked, feeling the weight of her centuries-old sadness. "There are others," she replied, fading before she could explain further. "Now, each day is a battle, a search for what horrors still lurk within the walls of the Henderson house. Each night is a terror, filled with the faces of those who suffered here. My quest has become my curse, but I cannot stop, not now. There is no escape from the past, not until all is set right. As I continue this dread journey, the line between this world and the next grows ever thinner. The story of the Henderson house is far from over, and I am but a player on its haunted stage. The end is not yet in sight, and I fear what revelations the coming days may bring. I was now entrenched in a relentless battle with the unseen forces of the Henderson house, a place that had become not just a residence, but a realm of nightmares. With each passing day, the spectral encounters intensified, pushing the limits of both my courage and sanity. The house, with its endless corridors and shadowy corners, seemed to morph into a labyrinth designed to trap both body and soul. As I delved deeper into the secrets of the house, I uncovered more about the rituals that had cursed this place. The shadows that haunted these halls were not just spirits but souls bound by an ancient and malevolent force, unleashed by the rituals performed by the Hendersons in their quest for eternal life. The house was a prison, and these souls, denied their rest, yearned for release. Determined to end the cycle of terror, I scoured the house for any remaining artifacts connected to the rituals. My search led me to a hidden chamber beneath the cellar where the air was thick with the stench of decay. There, I found a chest containing a tome bound in human skin and a set of knives, their blades blackened with age and use. The tome, written in a language that twisted the mind, offered instructions for a final ritual, one that promised to either bind the curse forever or release it to consume all. With a heavy heart, I prepared for the ritual on the eve of the new moon, as the tome instructed. The house groaned around me, as if aware of my intentions and desperate to thwart them. The spirits grew frenzied, their whispers urgent and menacing. I arranged the ancient knives in a circle in the grand hall, where the energy of the house was strongest. Reciting the incantations from the tome, I felt the air grow electric, the veil between worlds thinning. The spirits swirled around the room, their forms blurring into a vortex of light and shadow. As the ritual reached its climax, Eleanor Henderson appeared before me, her spectral form clear and commanding. "Stop!" she cried, her voice echoing through the tumult. "The release you seek will unleash greater horrors. You must bind the curse, contain it, not free it." Her warning pierced the chaos, and I hesitated, the final words of the incantation dying on my lips. The spirits howled in protest, their forms pressing in on me, desperate and demanding. But in Eleanor's eyes, I saw the truth, the despair of centuries, the weight of unending torment. I could not, would not, unleash such darkness upon the world. With a cry of defiance, I altered the ritual, weaving a new spell with Eleanor's guidance. The knives glowed with a fierce, blue light, then shattered, their fragments turning to dust. The spirits screamed, their forms collapsing into the light, and then there was silence. The house shuddered, a deep, groaning sound that felt like a lament, and then stillness settled over everything. I collapsed, exhausted, my mind reeling from the ordeal. When I awoke, it was to a house bathed in sunlight, the air fresh and clean, free of the oppressive darkness that had ruled it for so long. As I walked through the halls, the house felt just like what it was, a house. No whispers haunted the air, no shadows moved in the corners. It was as if a great fever had broken, leaving behind only the memories of the nightmare. I left the Henderson house that day, never to return. I heard later that it had been renovated and sold to a new family. They say it's a happy place now, filled with laughter and love, a stark contrast to the dark days of its past. And so, the story of the Henderson house comes to an end, not with terror, but with peace. The curse was bound, the spirits released from their endless torment, and the darkness that had once seemed so impenetrable was no more. As for me, I carry the memories of those haunted days, a reminder of the time when I walked with ghosts and faced the depths of ancient evil. But now, at last, I sleep soundly, the whispers of the house nothing more than a distant echo of a battle fought and won. The shadows have receded, the curse contained, and the terror that once gripped my heart has faded into the light of a new day.